Hello, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Azhar Saeed. I am the Chief Technologist in the Telco team, and I'm here to talk about an interesting topic that's near and dear to all of us today. It's about edge. And the topic specifically we are going to discuss today is scaling edge computing today for impact tomorrow. I'm sure you've heard a lot about edge. I'm sure you have read a lot about edge. And edge is the most important topic for telcos in discussion. Most of the conversations that we have seen today on edge is no longer about why edge and where is my edge, but more around what is my edge and how am I going to deploy it. So the conversation has really moved on from why and where to when and how. Now, interestingly, I was talking to some customers, including telcos as well as enterprise customers, and they seem to be coming up with new novel ideas in terms of building the edge compute infrastructure. Public cloud providers have also joined into the fair, into the melee, in terms of how they are monetizing and building an edge strategy and how they are going to monetize their public cloud footprint to create an edge conversation. So edge is the hottest topic, and of course edge means you are deploying it beyond your centralized data center. You are deploying it into the field, into smaller data centers, into virtual central offices, and perhaps even in radio tower locations, which means edge is all about scale. Edge is all about massive scale, not just talking about hundreds of data centers, but maybe thousands of nodes and thousands of locations that need to be brought together and managed. The most interesting thing I've learned in the last 3 or 4 months is that edge is no longer a conversation around a single provider. There are consortiums that are coming up. There are providers that are actually coming together to build a multi-provider edge infrastructure, and particularly do some pilots and testing around enabling edge applications for better roaming. So let's say you're a subscriber. You've subscribed to an edge service from a single provider. Now you roam on to a different provider. And how would you actually carry that particular service from one provider to the next? And what sort of what sort of features or parameters the service provider needs to expose to actually get a seamless service with respect to edge, the service that you have subscribed to. So this is an interesting conversation. So providers are no longer talking about a single edge or an edge within their domain, but now they're talking about multi-provider edge, federated edge, and so on and so forth. Now, in terms of use cases, the use cases have also evolved considerably. The use cases have moved on from single, low latency app that everybody talks about with respect to smart car, to specialized applications in telehealth, in medicine, in insurance, in machine learning, in analytics. So all these different areas where edge can be applied. Edge is also being talked about as a sandboxed use case for public safety and security, in private 5G deployments, for mining industry, for oil and gas industry, for energy industry. All of these areas. So these are different use cases people are monetizing. One interesting use case I just ran into a couple of days ago is around a company that's looking to monetize dash cam data. So dash cam is what you put, a camera that you put in your car, perhaps to record your drive so that you can actually, do better when it comes to insurance claims. Insurance companies are encouraging that these days. And, through that data that's captured, if it's uploaded somewhere, then you can run analytics and figure out what road maintenance is required, how much traffic actually goes on a road at any given time. So those are very interesting use cases that people are looking into in terms of edge, and those require well beyond a single provider infrastructure. They're talking about now multi-provider edge or carrier independent edge. That's yet another conversation that we should probably spend some time later on if need be. Now, looking at the technology, what happens in technology is most of the technology today has been run on OpenStack, and using OpenStack as a way to penetrate deeper into the infrastructure and deploy OpenStack in smaller footprints or as remote compute nodes as part of the evolution of the OpenStack technology for edge. Now, increasingly, applications are much more containerized. Applications are being written to microservices. So it's not just about OpenStack, but also about deploying a Kubernetes-based platform all the way to the edge, and then managing those multiple different clusters. So the conversation's now really moving on from, hey, I need my IaaS infrastructure to scale to the edge, to, hey, I need my infrastructure that can run any type of application at the edge. It doesn't matter what it's running on. So that brings us to an interesting conversation around, okay, are these technologies really equipped to handle this type of large-scale deployment? A lot of enhancements have happened in the industry to understand how this technology scales and how something like Kubernetes, from a Red Hat point of view, it'll be an OpenShift product, can help you deploy in edge in these multiple different locations in different types of footprints. Now, that means the deployment models have to be extremely flexible. What deployment model would you choose for an edge? Do I need to deploy a very large data center at the edge, or can I actually scale down my deployment model to deploy in a few nodes with a very, very small footprint? All of those are possible, and all of those must be possible if you were to scale edge. So scaling edge is not just about cookie cuttering or stamping out multiple different replicas of the exact same feature set, but it's also about ensuring that you can actually address these different types of deployment models and scenarios. Now, what Red Hat really does is build its product based on open source. An open source platform allows you to build a tailored model to the deployment need that you have as a service provider. And so from our perspective, an open horizontal cloud is absolutely ideal to scale from your core data center to your central offices, to your metro pops, to your remote sites, and then to the customer prem or even device edge for that matter. Now, edge is about 4 different conversations. Device edge conversation, on-premise or enterprise edge conversation, telecom edge conversation, and cloud edge conversation. At the device edge layer, what you're talking about is managing different types of devices. These devices have embedded software in them. They could be running microservices. You could be actually managing those containers and microservices and applications. And that is a different scale point. Think of these as embedded machines where you're running an application that's embedded into the hardware, and these could be your cameras, your sensors, your video endpoints, and so on and so forth, or even your automobiles or your vehicles. At the enterprise edge is where your collection point of the data from these type of devices. Those could be your CPEs, your gateways, your IoT collection points, and IoT data collection points, and so on. The top is where you gather that particular information infrastructure through a telecom infrastructure. So that's your cell site, your RAN locations, your central office, your metro pop, and so on and so forth, where telecom has multiple different locations where edge data is actually accumulated, analyzed, mapped, and then acted upon to provide a different kind of service. And then of course there's the cloud edge, where you may have regional data centers to actually provide different kinds of low latency services. So across all of these footprints, you need a platform that is extensible from your cloud data center to your edge device, through the telecom edge, through the enterprise edge, and through the cloud edge. Everything, it needs to be a common look and feel, common experience, and a common platform across the board. That's where the open horizontal platform really comes into picture, and that's where an open horizontal platform is highly beneficial in terms of deploying edge. Now, another question that gets asked is, what about architecture? How are the architectures evolving, and what are the standards? What are people talking about? Now, scaling that edge to those thousands of sites with very small footprint at each site means you also need to have operations that are very different. You need equipment to provide telemetry. You need equipment to provide information back to the central site so that you can actually remotely monitor and control these thousands of clusters or thousands of nodes that are distributedly deployed inside the infrastructure. That information that comes into the central site has to be automated and acted upon in a workflow that allows service providers to really scale this type of deployment. So as you build this scalable infrastructure, it's no longer about doing truck rolls every time, but it's also about ensuring that that particular, in fact, truck roll, if you try to do truck roll for these many thousands of edge sites, it's going to be too cost prohibitive. So the idea is to deploy these in a zero-touch manner, in an automated operations, as well as then automate the entire process of deployment, management, configuration, troubleshooting, and remedial information in a completely automated manner from an end-to-end. We have some examples of very interesting automation done by some service providers around the world as they go deploy these radio sites or these edge locations, which is completely in a zero-touch manner. So all you do is plug in, power up, walk away. Everything gets automatically provisioned based on what the location, based on the information. So operations become incredibly important, and they have to be scaled. And the only way they can be scaled is via automation. And automation is critical to going and deploying edge on these large number of sites. So now that we've gone through these 4 or 5 topics, that is edge conversations about, now, it's conversations happening now, and it's more about when and how, not why and where. And we discussed a number of use cases. We've discussed the technology evolution from virtualization environments to microservices and container environments, and we've looked at some of the deployment models in terms of various different footprints and architectural standards. So then the question is, what's next? Well, what's next is, in my opinion, some very interesting set of applications that you will actually begin to see. And since telcos are already beginning to talk about these type of multi-provider edge or federated edge models, you will actually, it's not too far when you'll begin to see actually edge deployments happening within a provider network, and then public cloud players getting into this mix in terms of how their edge can be intertwined with a provider edge to be able to provide a seamless service for low latency. Now think of it, my son plays a lot of online games. He plays these, I'm sure all of you know about this, Fortnite. Fortnite is a multi-party game that you play online, and it is latency sensitive. Now the moment there is a problem with bandwidth or there's a latency problem, he starts to complain. Dad, your Wi-Fi is not working, right? That's the problem. Now how does a service provider fix that in terms of providing an ultra low latency capability? How can they slice functionality across the infrastructure, and how that slice is mapped to an infrastructure, and how that infrastructure can then deliver that guaranteed service? So that conversation from a single provider to multi-provider, and then to exposing these through network functions and allowing services to be built, charged, and managed across these type of multi-provider networks. One interesting thing that Red Hat has done most recently is the ability to manage multiple different clusters through a single pane of glass, regardless of where those clusters are, whether they are in the local POP or in a public cloud data center, that you should be able to manage them independently and see the information through a single pane of glass. I think with that capability and what providers are really trying to do in terms of building these new services, it is an excellent match in terms of what you'll end up seeing probably over the next 12-24 months. More edge deployments, highly scalable to thousands and thousands of sites, and definitely some new services that you're beginning to see. Thank you for joining me. I hope this was informational to you, and please provide us feedback. We'd be happy to listen and talk to you if you're interested in any of these topics. Bye-bye.